This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Tales From The Crypt podcast.
You're not exactly gentle, are you, man?
Pain is good for you. You gotta keep your mouth shut.
So what's the deal with your eye, man? Or is that just for effect?
This was payment for a tattoo that I did for Baby Doc while he was running Haiti. He didn't like the story that his body had to tell, so he took out my eye with a salad fork.
Oh, shit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz.
And I'm Gil Adler.
This is a kind of a Tales from the Crypt reunion show. Rick Bota was one of our DPs over many, many seasons. I think he's got 20 episodes to his credit. And some of the best episodes of the whole series. Billy Friedkin's episode is Rick shot that. Food for Thought, the circus episode that was his. The Cage, the Pit was a Rick Bota episode. He's a lovely person.
And he worked with Gary Fleeter, and he worked with Walter Hill.
Oh,
and he and I worked together quite frequently on the wraparounds.
That's right. You shot the wraparounds together.
Yeah. And that collaboration was one of the best.
Right.
And he was one of the best cinematographers I think I've worked with.
Right. In addition to Kevin Yeager directed the wraparounds, you directed some of the wraparounds, and towards the end, actually, Rick Bota.
Rick did. Yeah.
Directed, and as he'll tell you, that's how he got into the DGA.
So without further ado,
here's Rick. I did not know you were a doctor's kid. I grew up a doctor's kid too. My dad was a surgeon. You know, my dad always had a credit on the show. He was our medical consultant.
That's so cool.
And,
I didn't know that. That's really
yeah.
good. And like the final way back when in the scrolling credits.
He's there. Yeah.
In
fact, I think my dad shot a sequence with the Crypt Keeper. He is. The Crypt Keeper does something to my father in one of the Crypt Keeper segments, and
oh my God, that's amazing.
You know, it's funny. Having been a doctor's kid, there was a certain expectation when I was growing up that I would be a doctor too. Did you face that?
Well, so interesting you would say that. I always say when I was born, it was like, is it a boy or a girl? It's a doctor.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
And so, yeah, I was, you know, it's funny. My nephew, my brother's youngest actually, is in his third year of medical school right now. And he's the first one of all of us, because I had a sister and two brothers. Nobody went into medicine. But yeah, I was destined to be, but I don't know how your path went, Alan, but mine was just, I was always a creative mind and an artist. But in the 60s and the early 70s in my grade school and in high school, you didn't nourish art. You know, it wasn't like, oh, this kid's got some talent. Right. It was like, no, just keep plugging away at bio and you'll get it. Right. You'll get it.
I sucked at math. I couldn't, anything that has just one answer, I'm sorry. I can't be part of that. That kind of killed my ability to do science because you needed to have the math. And so my parents saw that probably was not going to be my path.
Mine didn't really. Now they're cool, but it was 20 years into my career of filmmaking when it was still, you can still apply. You can still find a real job.
It's funny, producing a show, writing and producing a hit TV show, and having my parents come visit the set. My dad spent lots of time on the set. Sometimes Lee Webb would put them to work. If they needed a remote buzzer on a door, someone to just open the door now. Lee would give that job to my dad whenever he'd visit the set. My father sort of kind of saw what I did. When people would ask them socially, what does Alan do? He'd shrug.
Yeah. Yeah, they both caught on after seeing a few things broadcast, like whatever the first ones in an actual credit comes up. It's like, oh, you actually are. Yeah, yeah. And then when the operating or first assistant went to DP and I'd get a front credit, I think that was the change. Was like, oh, wait. Either they didn't understand what a front credit was, it somehow made sense and softened the fall.
When I started out, my parents had no idea what I did for a living. I was in New York and I was off Broadway. I was trying to produce plays. And so one day my dad comes over to the house and I go, okay, let me see if I can help you here. Here's my diary of my work. And I just want you to open it at random and I'll go through that day with you. Oh, that's a good idea. Maybe then I'll understand. So I go through the whole day. He picks his page and I go, okay, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I got to get on the phone because I've read people I'm talking with in Switzerland, and they're ahead of us. So I got to get up at 6 so I can speak to them because by then it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I do this and then I do, was the response. And then I meet with these writers and we have this writers meeting and then we did it. And that's my day. I finished like around 7 or 8 in the evening. And my dad said, oh, and I said, so now do you get it? Do you see it? And he said, yeah, I really do. But I just have one question. I said, what's that? He goes, what do you do for a living?
To the end. To the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just a foreign concept to them. All right, so you were a creative person. Was it movies, theater at first that drew you?
Bob Seger's got a great song, UMC, upper middle class. It was just even in Flint, there was always classes and we all did different. My other 2 brothers were sports related or whatever. We all did hockey, being the good Canadians.
Sure.
I was always enrolled and enjoyed art classes. I had sculpting and oil painting and sketching. And I mean, like the Flint Institute of Arts, when I was probably 12, I remember riding my bike there on Saturday mornings. But again, it just was never, all the pictures were framed and all the ceramics were put on a shelf somewhere, but it was just not it wasn't considered like a goal to go into that art, into that field. And by the way, in Flint nowadays, kids, my daughter knows, most kids know filmmaking, film business. I never knew about it, never thought about it. And so my hobby became, my dad was kind of a gadget, had a Super 8 camera. My dad had a lot of still cameras, and he bought me, I still have it.
Oh,
wow. I think it was my 13th birthday, my Canon FTB. So I documented with real film, 35 millimeter, a lot of my childhood, but this led to a dark room. And so I spent a good part of my junior high in a dark room, processing my own black and white.
Okay. So it was photography that brought you in.
Photography is the base of, check this out. So photography is the base of all of my creative endeavors later, like when I went into cinematography, it was sort of like, oh, wow, I kind of know how to do this. But I was still going through, the routine of bio. I was a bio major at University of Michigan. Well, not a major. I ended up going through a psych.
You were fighting it, weren't you?
No, I was really swimming upstream hard.
Oh, man. Oh, geez.
And it still never occurred to me. And in my junior year, I roomed with a guy that I just spoke to this morning. Actually, we FaceTimed just to say hi, ever 40-year friendship.
Yeah.
5. He was in the film school at U of M. And I remember sitting up trying to figure out how many answers there were to the math and the chemistry and calculus. And he's cutting films and planning projects. So Mike, who's one of my best friends, one weekend he was doing a student film and I was actually in his student film. And then I think I shot a few, and then we used to start getting equipment, early video equipment, big Sony with the 1/2-inch reel-to-reel we carry around the deck.
Sure.
We still have some footage somewhere. And that's in my junior year, end of junior year, I was like, wait a second. what's that? I didn't even know that there was a way you could make a living, or that's an industry. So after I graduated from U of M, I just started sniffing around. I really in Detroit, in the Detroit market, which was like the industrial market. That's where it all kind of started.
Sure.
I did what I don't know if it's a lost art, is working your way up, tried to get my foot in the door. What can I do? PA in an office, PA on a set. And that's when I started looking around. I remember shooting some Tony Richmond. Remember that he was a music video guy, but a commercial director, a commercial shooter. I remember on a stage in Southfield, Michigan, shooting a Chevy commercial or something. And there, the blimped Airy BL and microphones and lights. And that's when, as a PA,
yeah,
just remember going, okay, I think I know what I'm going to do. And that was when I started doing the full court press and saying, okay, let's see if we can make this work.
You were a late bloomer in part because there was so many walls that were trying to keep you away from where you needed to head.
Yeah. But, again, it was just always just the way that it was. It was getting a degree in a real degree.
So late bloomer, how did you wind up become a cinematographer?
I started being a focus puller. I met two guys. I met so many names along the way, but Ralph, I can't remember his last name, but he had a little company, and I was American Film House, started with an A for production companies. And whether there was ABC Films or American Film House, I went in, met him, and he said, yeah, I do an occasional industrial film. Come on in. And I met a couple of guys, and that's when I became one of them. Peter Klein is still a good friend to this day. I became his focus puller and a CP16. And then I started working my way up. I started calling myself somewhere. I have still my little cards that, by the way, were done on what do you call those artists? It was like a graphic artist would do those little, you'd have a card made and they'd have to do it and layer it. And you'd
yeah. When you started working in movies, did that change how you saw movies, how you watched them?
No, because it was the industrial market and a really great place to learn. But there was no, it was like we do a 20-minute film on a wing nut from the Ford, whatever it was back then.
Yeah.
And I did a bunch of, we did some road trips where we went and did like steel factories and so forth. Detroit was a big union town back then, and I couldn't get into the union as an assistant. There was the apprenticeship, and it was also way more closed than it became. Beverly Hills Cop came to town to shoot the second unit, and nobody was available. And so I knew this one assistant, Annie Lucas, who I lost contact. Another name just popped up. She got me that job. I was a loader on Beverly Hills Cop, second unit in Detroit. It was, remember it's when the cigarettes at the beginning, he opens up the semi and Eddie Murphy's back there, who wasn't with us. But then the semi goes through that crazy trip all through that big stunt sequence. I was on that, and that is the answer. That's when I was like, oh, okay, not wing nuts and sheet metal. I got it.
You were already there. You were, you saw how the smoke and mirrors worked. What was it about? Was it just the scale?
Yeah, I think it was the content. It was like performances and story and character. And the industrial market wasn't that. The most glossy thing we did would be, a car commercial, and it was great training. I remember, the big Sykes and using all the dulling spray to get the right light. But, you'd sit back, and some of those were just a beautiful product shot, which, by the way, I never shot cars. It's not my field. But shooting that, I moved out to California 2 years later, but I met a bunch of guys that I just worked my butt off for them. One of them, Michael Menardis, and Todd Henry, another guy on it, gave me their cards and were like, hey, kid, if you ever come out, look us up. I moved out to California in 86, I think, and looked them up. They didn't directly launch me, but they certainly motivated me. I used to hang out at Panavision and just try and see if I could jump onto somebody's job as a loader, second, whatever. And I will say I jumped onto a job that Hal Needham directed. It was my first thing I ever did. A movie called Body Slam. It was wrestling. Early days, Roddy Piper. I was going to be the B camera first, and then the A camera first left. I got bumped up, and I literally, from that, as you guys probably have the same, from that job in San Bernardino in 80 whatever, I could go, I met that guy who met that guy who met that guy, and eventually landed on a job where I met F.A. And that's how.
There you go.
And that's the stepping stones that got.
F.A. Miller was the production manager on Tales from the Crypt, and just a wonderful, wonderful person, a great character. We're at some point we will do a whole episode, but we're going to do a tribute episode to F.A.
Wonderfully deserved. F.A. just was a really important. As I told you, he got me out of the farm club, and then I think Tales was really one of that was my first leap into a really big. I'd done some serious stuff with Frank Lupo and John Ashley. I don't know if you knew those guys.
Oh yeah.
We did a show called Werewolf.
Sure.
For a bunch of episodes, and I started as an operator on that. And got moved up on that to DP. I look at some of that lighting. But I was primed enough and did a good enough job that FA saw it and was like, hey, because I came in with you guys on season 3.
Yeah.
And FA brought me in.
You had also.
I remember having a conversation. Oddly enough, as you mentioned FA's name, it just dawned on me. I remember having a conversation about you, Rick Bota, with FA. In terms of coming into Tales. And I remember saying to him, but I mean, I don't see what he's done that would make me feel like he's got to be our DP when the rest of the world is out there. And I remember FA saying, you'll find out. If you'll just meet with him, you'll find out. And if you give him an opportunity, I'm telling you, he'll be fine. I remember that like it was yesterday. Oddly enough, until you said it, I wouldn't even have put it together. But as you said, FA, it just all came back like, oh my God, of course.
Justified apprehension, because I was green compared to, because I think Rob Draper, if I remember, was a seasoned guy and had left the show for whatever reason. But FA
really, that's what happened.
FA though, just a sweet guy. What is that? A soft talker, but carried a big stick, because FA relied on his cane. But he just was he was such a good UPM, and all the guys I've worked with, because that dude knew how to shake the tree to get the fruit, and he could be a ball breaker, but he did it so nicely, so kindly, and it was really like that adage that I only saw him get pissed maybe I don't recall exactly when, but like if he ever showed the snarl, it was like, whoa, no, I'm not messing around. But
no, FA was the best. I think he's the best I've ever worked with. He just knew his stuff, and he knew how to get what we needed to get done in a way that didn't piss everybody off or piss anybody off, and he was just so gracious and so kind. Yeah, I think about him often, actually.
The king of understatement.
Yeah.
Truly. Yeah, a good man. So, I owe that to FA bringing you guys and bringing me to you guys, you taking the shot on me. And you guys have probably spent many hours talking about Tales and how incredible, but for a young budding cinematographer, it was just the perfect,
Before you did Tales, though, you did Haunted Lives, True Ghost Stories with us.
Well, I went right over that one on IMDb. I was like, I'll never mention that one.
Yeah. Well, that's gotten a fair amount of play. We had Levy Isaacs. We talked to him a couple episodes back, and he did one of the episodes. Which do you remember which episode you directed? You DP'd?
I don't remember that. I don't. It's just one that I don't have too much recollection on that one.
Well, there was the Kate Morgan story, which was at the Coronado in San Diego. That was Levy. There was, I don't remember any of the others. I
Yeah, that's kind of like I'm trying to even think who was the director on that. I remember there's a story there, but I don't have it. I do recall that.
The series was ahead of the curve, unfortunately. Then suddenly the whole world became exactly that kind of show.
Yeah.
It was really, it is insane that show didn't become a raging success, considering
where it is today. But isn't like you say that about all the groundbreaking shows.
Yeah.
I shot, I guess it's a cult movie, but Barbed Wire with Pamela Anderson.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
And that movie did not do well.
Right. That was Adam Rifkin, wasn't it?
Adam Rifkin, and then there was another guy came in. There was some politics that went on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you look at that film, it just didn't hit. It didn't land.
Right.
And then today you look at Marvel and DC and Wonder Woman, and you're going like, wait, we did that 25, 30 years ago, and nobody liked it.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted it.
Yeah, these days Marvel farts and the whole world goes insane.
Right.
Going back 25, 30 years, I mean, Alan and I met with Stan Lee, and we wrote a show with Stan Lee all those years ago. And Stan wasn't doing all that well. I mean, Stan was in need of money, and William Morris put us together, and we came up with this show, and we thought we had a great show, and we couldn't sell it.
Isn't it? It's crazy when you go back and look at some of the decisions. Yeah. I'm sure other studios and networks look at it and go, "Whoops."
Yep.
Rethinking.
Yep.
Fortunately, that did not happen with Tales from the Crypt.
For me, it was just such a great experience with the anthology and having all the different people come through. And
you shot some amazing episodes. On A Dead Man's Chest, Billy Friedkin's episode.
Great experience to work with William Friedkin.
Yeah.
That was I have a really story on that, but it's so perfect. Like how to, the rough spots that you got to get over before you get sanded down in your field, both the craftsmanship and the personality, whatever. What were those 5 days?
5 days, 5 days. 5 days. 5 shoot.
After the 5th day and working at the end of the day, just tripping over cables to get to him, to shake his hand and, do the, here's my card, but I didn't. But I'm like, Billy, it was so nice to work with you. I'm so pleased. I hope you liked the episode. And he goes, it's great to work with you too, Dan. I just got the balloon just popped, and so we laughed about that for years. Here we go. Hey, how you doing, Dan? I was like, oh man. Look, we know the deal with it, right? The Rolodex, mine starts to get filled up, and I can't imagine his too. So I didn't take it personally, but at the moment it was like, oh shit. But yeah, I remember that one, and some of the when I look at the Tales episodes, because I remember that one, the dragon at the end, the tattoo. I just look at what we created pre-CGI.
Oh gosh, a practical puppet. And a complicated, tricky thing to try to pull off on a 5-day shoot with really a couple of hours in which to pull that off. And that was the pièce de résistance.
I was looking at Stephen Hopkins' Stared in Horror episode.
Yeah.
And look at that whole opening chase. All of that on stage. That whole thing. Greg Melton. Big Greg Melton fan, and I don't think we ever worked together again. God, would I love to circle back and work with him. He was just such a creative force on that show. We had that whole stage. I don't remember what that would seem like. It was the one on Victory, maybe, or wherever that was over in Van Nuys.
I think, yeah.
We had a change every year because they didn't give us the pickup until months after we finished, and I couldn't hold on to we couldn't hold on to the stage, so we would let them go. And Aaron Spelling would come and grab it as soon as we did it because we had fixed it up. We had put in offices and we spent a little bit of money. So Aaron would just grab it. And every time I would go to Joel and Dick and Bob and Walter and say, we should buy a warehouse. If not Tales, you guys are making other things. You'll use it. And they would go, get out of here. You buy a warehouse. We're not going to buy a warehouse. Go. And we never did it. So every year we were chasing our butt to get a warehouse that we would then have to fix up and build offices and then shoot it.
On that particular episode, those were the days of we did a forced perspective and about when he runs up to the house back there, there was like a
Right,
little
right,
roof, and I was
right,
looking at it the
right.
other day. You don't do forced perspective anymore. You don't. You know, I mean, in the next couple of years, you won't even build anything anymore. It'll all be.
Oh, why bother? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
Another
we'll
couple
get
of
into
years,
how
nobody,
it's changed.
another couple of years, nobody will even admit to having done forced perspective.
You also did Forever Ambergris. You worked with Gary. Now, so you worked with Gary Fleeter on Crypt before you worked with him afterwards.
I met Gary on Forever. Which one was first, Seance or Forever Ambergris? I can't remember. I think Forever Ambergris.
I think
was
Forever
first.
Ambergris was first.
Roger Daltrey, kind of
Yeah.
a cool.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'm not always. It was the director of the cast.
Yeah.
This episode.
Yeah, we felt the same way.
Yeah.
Alan and I would look at each other and go, really? Is Daltrey going to actually play? Yeah, we got Daltrey.
That was a pinch me. Pinch me.
He did great too. That was
hanging
like,
out with Daltrey.
I know. Yeah, Gary and I did that seance, and then we still are buds to this day. We are we've maintained that friendship. Actually, we're kind of two old dudes surfing together. We get out weekly or every other week, and have done several things. He's been so good to me and brought me on. I've shot several things for him, and we're actually getting ready. Hopefully, fingers crossed. It's early, but we're probably going to be doing a little horror film.
Oh, great. Good.
Yeah. But
Cool.
yeah, Forever Ambergris. Oh, and Steve Buscemi.
Yeah.
Steve Buscemi.
Yeah,
Great.
terrific cast. Whirlpool with Mick Garris.
And your performance
And,
as
and me, it was my
Iggy or Iggy.
yeah, it was wow, man. That's wow, boy. Yeah.
Richard Lewis. I remember that. Yeah, that was Mick Garris, right?
Yeah, it was Mick. He cast Rita Rudner as the lead, which was, hey, to Mick's credit, he was thinking outside the box, casting wise, way ahead of the curve. And I was not happy with the choice because I don't know. To me, it screwed something up inside my head, and so I think to make it up to me, he cast me.
Did great. I was more than just like a walk-on. That was like a full-on.
I always thought he was making it up to me. I always thought he was making it up to me when he cast you, Alan.
The thing was about that script, it was the same scene played like 10 times. And so really I had to remember two lines, which I was going to say again and again and again. Really, it wasn't challenging. Anyway,
that has the great, all of them had said, it was the whole Tales from the Crypt ending. It's always, I remember, I have a few favorites, but Forever Ambergris was, cinematically and just story. I love that episode. Great line, Scott Rosenberg. War is hell, Dalton, but it sure makes you sleep good. Do you remember, did you guys, I don't know if, because Scott and Gary were friends, and I always remember Scott, I don't know if that was his treatment or if he wrote that or if it was.
Scott wrote the script, yeah.
Yeah.
And Gary was very protective of Scott's work, and whenever I would attempt to revise Scott, Gary would insist that I put Scott's dialogue back, and so that's usually what we did.
Scott's done very well for himself. He and Gary are still friends to this day as well. And then the other one of my other favorites, I just liked, and it's nothing cinematically, I loved what we did, but it was Ease'll Kill Ya.
Oh yeah, sure. Gorgeous.
That's
great looking show.
And that just captured like the artist that had to go get the paint with real blood. That episode's one of still my favorites. It just was a great looking episode.
It's really good. Maybe I had to buy it.
Then, of course, there's You Murderer, Bob Z's last episode. When Gil and I went up and had lunch with him, he said, after we had lunch, all right, guys, all I know is I want to do a complete subjective camera show from the point of view of a dead guy. That's all I know. Oh, and I want the dead guy to be played by Humphrey Bogart. Okay, how are we going to do this, guys?
If somebody watch that episode and see what you guys, because you wrote that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very clever and must have been a painstaking way to write a script, to know that you had to land.
It was hard, man. That was a puzzle. It was a real puzzle because all right, in order to, there were 18, I think there were 18 film inserts where we suddenly see a reflective surface and we see Humphrey Bogart. And he's, I think in almost all of them, he says a line of dialogue. Well, we had to create a justification to get into the line and a justification on the other side of the line. And so sometimes, we had these great pieces of film that we wanted to use, and the puzzle was bending the story to make them work.
It was all subjective camera, so it almost felt like it was supposed to feel like it was one shot, know.
Yeah,
and we just kept going and going, and we had these inserts of Humphrey Bogart that we couldn't do it as an insert. We had to do it on a reflective surface, on some kind of so we had to figure out, okay, what is the reflective surface for this? How many times can you go past a mirror or a desk with a piece of glass on it?
Yeah. We had to get more and more clever.
But you guys have been coming up with all those, because there was a flask, there was the mirror in the thing, obviously mirrors, and there was just so many. Yeah, I remember that episode very well, because also that was my on camera. That's the closest I've ever got to being on camera. All that stuff.
Oh, I
was in wardrobe, so all the hand checking and all the reaching was stuff. But I still look at that and I go, oh yeah, I remember that. I guess I have that.
That was John Lithgow and Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah. The challenge of shooting it, because all right, we never rehearsed, but for that episode we had a couple of days of rehearsal, not just because it was Zemeckis, and the rehearsal wasn't for the cast, it was for you all, it was for the crew. So the crew had to be able to choreograph each and every shot so as not to suddenly end up on camera.
I just remember on that particular show where we'd put lights, and I go, Bob, we're coming through the door and we're going to end up on Lithgow on the floor. Like, I don't know, he goes, just light up from the floor. We'll take him out. And that was like one of the first times, huh? No, don't worry about it. We'll just erase the lights out. I don't get that. And now, of course, it's just, part of the language.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's all different lights, right? We just got so many different instruments now and LEDs. And those are still back in the days of big HMIs or arcs or whatever.
Right.
Having Bob Zemeckis directing certainly helped, but I was nominated for an ASC award that year, and I was just so grateful to him. But you know the deal. It's like, wait, who Rick? What? What's that? Oh, Zemeckis directed it. That's great. It was a good episode. Well written, guys. By the way, speaking of bringing the stepping stones of my career, meeting you guys and just meeting all those directors, it was a really important part of like where I branched off in my career. But also now, I started directing about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that started by me in the same way that F.A. Gil, the look you must have given to F.A. when he was mentioning me was the same look you gave me when I came in, I think like season 2. And I was like, Gil, do you think I could direct one? Excuse me. But what you did do was I directed. I didn't really, because Kevin Yeager, I lit and just sort of placed the cameras for the Crypt Keeper segments. But I don't know if you remember, but you guys helped me get into the DGA. Right. And that was a huge bonus for me then, that paid off years later, that I was able to work the DGA jobs. But I always remember that, and a tip of the hat and a sincere thank you for the opportunities you guys provided me creatively and inspirationally.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Want a little more champagne?
When I started directing the Crypt Keeper wraparounds with you, I mean, you were the cinematographer. That collaboration, to me, I remember that vividly, and I remember it very fondly because it was so great. It was so
damn. I love when that happens.
Electrifying creatively for me, because I would say, okay, look, I'm thinking of doing this, and then you would say, yeah, well, let's put the smoke there, make the smoke red, make it blue.
Stella!
Let's move the camera this way. Let's go right through the smoke. And I'd be sitting there going, shit, why didn't I think of that? We would play off of each other, and all of a sudden we were shooting something. I'd go, this is unbelievable. This is better than I could have thought of. I really remember that very clearly.
is to inspire one another. Hell, why didn't I think of that? It's just the best way to be working together. So we did. We inspired each other.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I remember those Crypt Keeper segments that I don't know, was it standing set? I think we kind of put them at the end, or was it? I can't remember. I remember making time. We'd go over and shoot one of those, but
yeah, we would have the set for the Crypt Keeper. That sometimes changed because of who he is portraying, whether it was a chiropractor or a beetle or a God knows what.
Yeah.
But that we would put him in these different sets. But then, how do we light it? How do we make it look like it's Tales from the Crypt as well, and yet make it different every week?
And you play the gag.
And that was the challenge.
By the way, that the Crypt Keeper segments were truly smoke and mirrors because we had these little things in the back with broken mirror pieces, and we'd shine the lights to get that shimmering light, always fogging up, using whatever we used back then to smoke it up. And then Kevin and his guys, the puppeteers, those were fun, but so well campy written, you guys.
Well, don't forget, there were 6 puppeteers to run the Crypt, Keeper, and then we had to hide them. I mean, there's 6 guys with their hands in various parts of the Crypt Keeper's body, making it move, and we had to hide all that.
Yep.
It was always strange when they would Gil or Kevin would yell action, and suddenly the Crypt Keeper would come to life.
Yeah,
he'd do the scene, and hey, I wrote the damn thing. I know he's a fucking puppet, and yet something happens inside your head, and suddenly, I don't know, he just becomes real. And then he'd finish and cut, and he would sag back onto the desk.
Yeah. The other thing is going over and like holding a meter. And if the guys were all puppet, they take them and turn them toward you, and you just whoa.
Yeah.
Gil, I don't know if you remember when I watch, and I'd love to ask you because I love the camp of it. I'm setting it up, so I don't want to force you into liking it. But I remember when we had the discussion for the wraparound on what was the movie theater? Was that Demon Night or was that House on Haunted Hill? That was Demon Night, right?
Yes, that was Demon Night. Yeah,
in Westwood.
In Westwood. Yeah.
Westwood, because you directed that, and I remember we were talking once. I had that question.
Gil directed the Crypt Keeper segment.
Crypt Keeper, yeah. Ernest Dickerson directed the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about shortly.
Good catch. But Gil, we were like, how can we get the rose to come down through the dirt? And, of course, now it would be first of all, just be all completely animated CGI. And you'd go like through the rose maybe and through things. But we were like, what do we do? And we ended up doing half a wall. And it was almost like we sliced the earth in half, and then you saw the rose go down. And then today I look at it and I go, man, that is so campy and so good. It's just like, I love that rose going down. And I don't know if that's at the end or the beginning, but
the end, I think.
Yeah.
Since we're at Demon Night, 25, well, more than 25 years after the fact, that is considered a classic horror movie by people who love horror movies.
Well deserved. That's a fun film. That's a fun action horror film. I still remember shooting you can go to certain scenes and just look and go, I remember that night shooting William Sadler out in that car. And then we did some of it on stage too. But yeah, that was a wonderful, that was like an old hangar or something, right? Didn't we shoot that in a hangar?
Van Nuys Airport.
Yeah, Van Nuys Airport. Yeah.
Great cast. Had a wonderful
cast.
Oh, terrific cast. Billy Zane, of course. Bill Sadler is always a pleasure to work with. Jada, Dick Smith, Dick Miller.
Yeah, Dick Miller. Ernest is up here shooting a TV thing right now. Called me up, and I saw him last weekend and the weekend before. We spent all day Saturday together with our wives, and it was just great. It was just so nice, just chatting and spending the day.
He is a good human being. I like that man a lot. Yeah. Every time I see him, like I say, we all are getting older, and sometimes when you just pop in on somebody, you don't always remember their name. You gotta, and every time I bump into him somewhere,
why do you say that, Dan?
Oh, that's such boom. I served it up. I know my new name. But yeah, Ernest did a great job. And also, I don't know if you've talked film. Ernest is a film resource like no other. He knows every horror film, just about every genre, but and all cultures too. All the Hong Kong films and the early Japanese films. He's a wealth of knowledge. I had a great time working with Ernest.
After that, Toby Hooper and Ernest and I, we became quite close, quite friendly. And well, actually, me and Toby first, and then Ernest joined us. And we used to meet at the
Musso Frank's.
Musso Frank's, right? Like at 7 o'clock at night, we'd have dinner, and then we would close the place up. They would ask us to leave like around midnight. Because they were closing at 11.
I want to go home. Go.
And we called it the Whale and Ale Club. And Jeannie would join us once in a while, my wife. And we would just sit there and talk. And we had no idea how much time had passed. And then finally they would throw us out. And we'd go, we've been here 4 hours? We've been here 5 hours? How could that be?
Good friends, good friends sharing good stories.
Yeah, it was just fun.
Todd invited me. I must have been already 5. I'm going to go. Was it last week? No, it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Todd put together a little, I think 25th something for Demon Night, and they rented a screen. I don't think, would I see? I could have seen you. Were you there, Alan? I think Gil.
Yeah. So we must have seen each other there, but it was a bunch of years ago.
Yeah, whatever it was, but it was so great to see it on the big screen.
Yeah.
Was the ending? That was all practical effects, wasn't it? I think that was all Todd Masters stuff.
Yeah. With the demons emerging from the ground, it was practical.
Yeah. That I do remember that, because to me it seems like the one time we got into some CG and it was early was on House on Haunted Hill. Yeah. And that was just the ending up in the attic when the creature, the dust or the mist or whatever that black creature ooze was.
Yeah.
And that was another fun film to shoot. Bill Malone.
You had an enjoyable creative time on that project?
House on Haunted Hill?
Yeah.
Jeffrey Rush, such an amazing guy to work with. That was a challenge because I think it was Greg, but it could have been, no, I don't remember who the production designer was. It wasn't Greg. Wish I knew. But he did a great job, but he built that set was kind of all connected. We spent most of that entire production in that set. So that was a challenge, trying to come up with, and for Bill, but just trying to find angles and not get bored of the same lighting and the same shots. But yeah, that was a real challenge to spend that schedule in there.
It sounds like Greg didn't do Demon Night either. Ernest had his own guy, Christian Wagner, that he had designed the set. And the thing that Greg did that I think he did better than Christian Wagner did was he made the set accessible to the crew. And we had problems on Demon Night, I remember, because we built that whole church inside the airplane hangar.
Yeah.
But there were walls that could not be moved.
Yeah.
And so there were shots that could not be had.
I do. Now that you're saying that, you're bringing up some old memories of going up. We also shot up on that second floor. And anytime you got to move a crew up a floor on stage with because if I remember correctly, we had just 2 staircases on either side.
Yeah.
You must have had a back entrance too. But yeah, it's like your guys' show. It's the nuts and bolts of filmmaking. I mean, what you see is took a shit ton of work and good people, creative minds to get there.
And when you've done it the right way, when you do it not quite the right way, or even worse, the wrong way, it just hurts because you know how to do it better.
Yep. Every show you learn a little something else, right? And on that one, whatever, if there were some design flaws on that, for somebody on the next show can actually, whether it be a key grip or a dolly grip who had to lug it up there, could say, "Can I make a suggestion?" And the smart ones go, "Absolutely."
Right.
One thing
for sure.
Yeah, it's one thing I do when on the cruise is I like to just sort of put it out there at the beginning, whether I'm shooting or directing. It's like all ideas are good and valued. If you got something to say, let's build this ship together. But equipment into sets has always been the bane of the grips and the electricians if it's not designed as such.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you segue into directing.
I did. I started with a couple of those Crypt Keeper wraparounds, and then that got the DJ, and then it was piecemeal. I would do a series, and somebody would say, if you did the second season, it's like they'd sweeten the pot by giving me an episode, and then they just started to not just be a throwaway, and I was able to just build upon that, and then went off and I don't know. I put it. If I look at my credit list, I just go, God, I forgot about that one as well. The years just pass, the jobs just keep going, and somehow you make a living, carve it out.
In 2002, thereabouts, suddenly you get involved with Hellraiser, the Hellraiser franchise.
Which do you find more exhilarating, Trevor? The pain or the pleasure? Personally, I prefer pain.
That was actually through Gary Fleeter. Gary was doing Imposter. So I came in and did a second unit that Gary fought for me to get again. He's just been a huge friend and advocate for me throughout the career. But yeah, somehow Andrew Rohn over there offered to do, do you want to do, back in those days it was called the direct, now it's streaming. Back then it was direct to DVD.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So he said, do you want to direct, or it was part of the negotiation, we'll give you a direct to DVD film. Sure. And it was like Hellraiser. I was a fan of Hellraiser, the movie, the original Clive Barker, all of the first, because I think the one I did was number 6.
Yeah.
And I was a big fan of the first 3. But yeah, I got an opportunity to do, I did 1, they loved it, and I did 2 more. That was like the first sort of like creative feature that I got to do and be a part of and design, and, as opposed to coming in on a series where it's like, here's your days, here's your cast, here's your crew.
Yeah, you're just a traffic cop on a TV series.
Yeah. But one of the most thrilling parts of that show, for my experience, was meeting with Clive Barker. I got to sit down.
I was going to ask you about that. You got to sit down and first of all, he approved of you to take over the franchise.
Well, at that time, he wasn't. There was some deal made that he wasn't a part of it. I think they had licensed it away. I don't know exactly what it was, but I do remember getting a call, and he was not all that pleased that I thought he had been informed, but he wasn't, because I did 1 in Vancouver and then 2 in Romania. But I remember that my then wife was my daughter's mom, and phone rang. These phones.
Oh gosh!
It's Clive Barker. He invited me, sort of, to see the cut, and so on the down low, I went over and showed him the cut, and he really liked it. It was such a gratifying and relieving experience to have him actually be watching it, and then at the end be very complimentary of it.
Give us a thumbs up.
I was really pleased. It was those are tough to do too, because you talk about being a traffic cop, but shooting those, I think we did it, I mean, now it's not that uncommon, but it was a 20-day schedule, which I guess is okay now. I think I've done them in 17 for a movie the week, but you know the deal. 20 days is you're hustling to get the work done.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that one, and then they liked it enough to give me 2 more. Anytime you get to travel and film, I love it, because you get to experience a different country, different city, but more than just the people and the restaurants, you really like immersed in the culture day to day, become a family on the set.
Mm-hmm.
But
as a fan of the series, what did you try to bring to it that wasn't there before?
By the time you get to number 6, I mean, there's a reason why they had a young director, or not so young, but unseasoned director, because I did it for whatever they were offering and agreed to the 20 days. But the first one, I wanted to go back to, they give you a script and then we sort of developed it. But I didn't write it, but we just sort of shepherded it into a direction.
Sure, of course.
But we put back in the original Ashley Lawrence, who was in the original. So we tried to go back to the try to get some, like the fans of the series by number 6, introduce some of the characters we're used to. Brought in Doug Bradley, who was Pinhead at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to get back. That was a thrill to go back to the original and try and, nod or tip of the hat to it.
Having been involved in successful franchises like Tales from the Crypt, what makes it work is a very particular thing. What the audience loves about it is a very particular thing, or a couple of things. The audience for the Hellraiser series was very passionate.
I'm not gonna say it's cheating, but I really wanted to just deliver what I liked in the first one. And then I went back and studied it, and we did, there was some certain lighting and certain reveals of Pinhead when he came in, and the change that had kind of got lost in like 4 and 5. And then
what about the core mythology in the Hellraiser series? Grabs you.
I mean, it's kind of, you have to really serve that up on all of them, because, by that time you have to stay true to the mythology.
Indeed.
Like,
it's the franchise.
Yeah. I spent a good part of my youth in a dark room and developed, a knack for shooting and shadows and contrast and lenses. But I also was into comic books and horror films. I mean, I loved all, it's kind of cliche. Every horror buff would say, well, I was when I was a kid, but I truly did love the old, the original Lon Chaney werewolves and Invisible Man and the King Kongs, and Godzilla was a big fan of. And me and my brothers had all those little, I think they were Rydell, those models that I can still smell, those little jars of paint that we used to put the models together and paint them. So to come back and then later actually be filming horror and kind of knowing what scared me, I just had, I don't know if I have a knack for it. I'll let other people decide that, but I certainly do enjoy it. I love a good scary sequence and bringing it all together, from lighting to camera to performance and to music and sound effects. I don't have to preach into the choir on that, right?
Right.
Obviously, there are still mountains for you to climb.
Yeah, I'm still enjoying it. Like I said, I have a great possibility. Well, it's something that's kind of rolling ahead. It's a little early, but it's really going to be a great little movie, and it's a total creature feature. So I'll know more in the next month or so. But when that gets going, I'll hopefully invite you both to the premiere. But you know how that goes.
Hey, man. We both hope we get to attend one.
Yeah.
I got one last question for you. What's your favorite surf spot?
We surf out at Paradise Cove. In fact, we're going out tomorrow at 1 p.m. at low tide.
Well, say hi to Gary for us, will you? I haven't seen Gary in 100 years, boy. I haven't seen him in a long, long time.
He is, he really came out of the gates on Tales. I think that was his first thing after UFC. Joel saw his film or something and put him on Forever Evergreen, and he's been nonstop since.
Yeah.
I definitely will pass that along.
Yeah.
He's alumni as well, so maybe we'll see him on this podcast.
We would love to have a conversation. So hey, we'll probably get you to slip us his.
You definitely will.
His information.
Absolutely.
And then he'll never get away from us.
Right.
He'll be doomed.
Yeah, we're gonna go tomorrow. With any luck, we won't hurt ourselves. When you're young, you're having a blast, and I'm going surfing, and now it's like you come in and you're limping in the door and go, "Where are you surfing?" And then I'll close on this that I still hold and have in my office. This is the parking placard. Sure. And back in the day when it's not a piece of paper that somebody printed in the printer, this is like a piece of cardboard.
Right.
You could board up a window with that, for fuck's sake.
Anyhow, it was a thrill and so great, and I really will I'll close on and say how grateful I am to you guys to put up with me, to have me, but also for us to just have that experience together. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, mine too. And especially doing those wraparounds with you was just great. It was just magic. It really was just magic.
Likewise. Yeah, it's a good group of people, once in a lifetime.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Rick. And
thanks
see
again.
You next time. We'll see you next time, everybody. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason and Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast, followed up for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrorific crypt content.